On this week's episode, I'm joined by Rachel Talibot, originally from the UK, preparing to make her home in Portugal, and one of the world's most renowned ocean photographers. We discuss, amongst other things, her family's special relationship with Portugal, her love affair with the ocean, and why she wants to keep it all to herself. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life, and I'm delighted to be joined here by Rachel Talibot. Rachel, hello. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hello, Dylan. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. We've got a background, and I met Peter before I met you. You're I'm not going to say your better half. You're the better half, but I knew Peter before I met you, and we'll maybe chat about that. And in Portugal, you would be called Raquel, not Rachel. So just maybe think about doing that now.
Very glamorous.
Exactly, Raquel. Well, Rachel's nice as well. It's good. Rachel, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I am a photographer, a full-time professional photographer, and I'm based in the UK, in the sort of the suburbs of London, in a town called Weybridge in North Surrey. Married to Peter, who you mentioned, and we absolutely love Portugal. Go there quite a lot, and as you know, we're currently building a house there, so that's exciting. And yes, in my job, I'm a full-time professional photographer, as I said, and I specialise in seascapes, particularly fond of waves.
We can see the background there, some big waves, and it's an amazing story because when I met Peter, he told me about you, and that one of the reasons why you guys first discovered Portugal was because of your work and because of taking some photos of some big waves. So we'll jump into that. But I mean, were those your first experience of Portugal, coming here to take photos? How did that all begin?
Well, in fact, we've been coming to Portugal for a long time. I think we started coming to Portugal in 1997, and then we used to go to the Algarve, like a lot of Brits, on family holidays. We had young children, and the Algarve is really great for families with young kids. It was so nice. We used to stay in a town not far from Lagos. Well, I probably pronounced that badly. And it was really nice. It was very relaxed. There weren't that many tourists there, although certainly there were some. But we always felt that we could just relax, and the children could play in the sand, and the beaches on that bit of the coast, they're quite calm and safe for children. And we did that almost every year for many, many years. And then towards the end of that stage, we found ourselves venturing to the west coast of the Algarve more often, Sagres and all the beautiful beaches on the Atlantic coast there. And we really loved those beaches. They're far less crowded, where they don't have the facilities, so they attract a different crowd. But our kids were older. And then my daughter in particular really enjoys surfing. So those beaches then became attractive to us for other reasons. And we found that although we love the Algarve, we were particularly drawn to the wilder beaches and the big waves of the Atlantic coast. So then we started exploring further north, and the reason we started going to the Silver Coast, and Nazareth in particular, though, that then was me saying, I want big waves and let's try there. And of course, there are plenty of big waves there.
Right now, right at this moment, while we're recording. So we were recording this in November, and actually almost December, and there's some big waves at the moment. You were recently here. How did your trip go? Did you have a good time?
Oh, it was amazing. Yes, I was really lucky. I was there the week before last, and there was some nice surf, and it was fabulous. Just wonderful. I mean, in the UK, if I'm photographing big waves, it's normally because there's a huge storm, and it's usually pouring with rain and really miserable, which I'm okay with. But when it's so refreshing to come to Nazareth and photograph waves in the sunshine.
Yeah. We've been having some wonderful weather. And this is what everybody says, that, okay, we're in the middle of November and the sun's shining and we're still walking outside, and it's beautiful. We're lucky here. We're very lucky. Are you missing it?
I am actually. After we were based in Nazareth for about 10 days, and at the end of it, I felt really quite at home, and didn't really want to come back. But we will be back many times, I'm sure.
It sounds like it. It sounds like. Rachel, for you, I mean, we'll talk about the photography side of things, because I'm really curious to get your take on that, and what makes this such an interesting place for photography and everything. But what were some of the things that kept you coming back to Portugal for so many times? Or some of those things that surprised you, but then kept you coming back and kept that relationship going?
I think one of the things that I most like about it is it feels very relaxed to me, and it feels as if everyone's sort of friendly, but they're also quite happy to just let you be. No one really minds what you're doing. You can just get on with it, and I love that. Whereas, I love England too, but here it's, especially in the south where I live, it's very crowded, and you never really get that feeling that you've got away from society and being busy and the hectic nature of it. Whereas in Portugal, I just feel like, you can go to a beach. I went one evening, I went to Praia de Grauha, which is, you'll know, in São Martino. And I went there just 2 weeks ago. I just went there one evening, and there was fog and there was nobody there. I had that whole beach completely to myself, which hardly ever happens here. And I just felt very at peace and very content to be in that beautiful place, just completely on my own. It was very special. And that's probably the thing I love most about Portugal.
Beautiful. We'll talk about that beach because it's special, which maybe we shouldn't talk about it. Otherwise, everyone will know about it, and then you won't be alone on that beach.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep that on the down low. For you, with that sort of, the Algarve, as you mentioned, is sort of very well documented. And you and Peter at that time were kind of trendsetters, because at that time nobody ventured up the west coast. What were the things that you discovered as you went further up this coastline? We'll jump and talk about the waves and the ocean and the beaches. But what were some of the other things that you discovered along the way that drew you to this part of the country?
Well, actually, I've got a nice little story about that. When my youngest child was 2 or 3, we were on holiday, again, staying near Lagos. And one evening, we drove out to Praia de Cordoama. Now, I know I'm pronouncing it really badly, so forgive me. I'll get better. I'm learning Portuguese, but it's hard. We drove out there and we took a picnic. And we sat on that beach and we had a picnic as the sun set. And then after it had got dark, there was a cafe and they were serving hot chocolate. We went and sat outside and wrapped the children in towels and things because it was a bit chilly, and had hot chocolate. And then we drove home. And my daughter, that's her first memory at all of life. That's her first memory. And she's never forgotten how magical that was. So I think that's just one example of how Portugal has become threaded through our whole family's life. It's hard to put into words. So a story seems an easier way to explain how special Portugal has been to us.
What were some of what were some of the differences for you between the southern coast and that western coast as you explored? What were some of the things that were different compared to what you had experienced in the Algarve?
I think a large part of it was this feeling that you reach the edge of the world. It's quite hard to explain, but that's how it feels. You drive on that road, you've got the big motorway, if you like, the big highway that gets you as far as Lagos and a bit beyond now, I guess. But eventually that stops, and it's probably changed a bit. I haven't been back for a few years. It's probably changed a bit now. I'm sure it's just civilization is creeping further west along that. But basically, once you've got past Lagos and maybe just Praia da Luz and a couple of other beaches there, it just got really rural, and there weren't many cars, and if there were, they seemed to be locals. And then as you kept going, maybe you encountered a few surfing dudes and their camper vans and all of that. But it just felt that you were leaving the world behind, civilization behind, the further you went. And I know Sagres has been more developed since, and there are some big resorts and things. But still, then you go out towards Praia de Cordoama and the other one there, Castillejo or Castillejo, however you pronounce it. And the roads become dirt roads, and, there's just one beach cafe and there's no facilities and there's just surfing dudes. And it just feels really different from anything that we have here, where everything's paved, all the roads are paved, there's loos at the beach and there's facilities, and, you pay for the car park, and it just felt like you'd escaped the world. And then in time, we explored further north up that coast, beyond the Algarve, into another area I can't pronounce, the Alentejo.
Alentejo, yeah.
That's it. And, some of the roads there, once you get off the highway, you're just driving through this farmland, and there's, a chap with his donkey and an old church, and it just feels like the land that time forgot, which is probably I'm in danger of romanticizing it, which is bad, I know. But for a visitor, that's quite exciting.
Yeah. And was that what it kind of appealed to you with the Silver Coast? That sort of a bit more rugged, a little bit more less built up, more beaches and winding roads and places where you can be on your own.
Exactly right. Nazareth, of course, has in the last decade become discovered, but I'm aware, although I wasn't going to it then, but a decade ago, hardly anyone talked about Nazareth or went there, just a few people in the know. Not many people at all. And it was a very quiet, sleepy fishing village, if you like. It's astonishing to me that beautiful fort on the headland wasn't open until, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, it's amazing. There's so much history in Portugal that is there, but you almost kind of happen upon it by accident. And then it's like, wow, it's a super discovery. Whereas here it would be, it would be an English heritage property, and there'd be a massive paved car park and, all of that. So it is just that sense of being totally relaxed, but actually there's so much to discover that you almost do feel like, I know you're not the first person to see it, by far you're not, but you feel as if there's a discovery around each corner.
Incredible. I've been in living in this area for 12 years. And when I lived in Nazareth before the wave, you could drive right down to that fort with your car. There would be nobody else around. And you could literally just park your car, sit on one of those low little brick walls. Okay, you couldn't get inside the fort, but you could just sit there, look either side of the beach. It was amazing. Now you can't get down there. Everyone knows about it. But it was always a special place for Portuguese people. If you speak to Portuguese people, they always knew about Nazareth, and it has a special place in like Portuguese folklore and tradition and things like that. So yes, how did a young English girl develop this love for the ocean, and this love for ocean photography?
Well, I had a slightly unusual upbringing. My dad was a really keen yachtsman and quite an ambitious one as well. So for the first 12 years or so of my life, every weekend, if the weather allowed, and all of the school holidays were spent at sea. We had different yachts as the years went on, but the one I most remember from my childhood was a 32-foot yacht. So we slept on the boat, and we would sail across the English Channel and go down the French coast or up into the canals of Holland, or we would sail along the British coast, usually heading west towards Devon and Cornwall. And in the summer, we would go for a whole month every summer and live on the boat. So I've spent a big chunk of my childhood at sea. Unfortunately, I have never, ever got over my chronic motion sickness. So I was poorly a lot of the time. But although I much preferred to appreciate the sea from the shore, I guess those years did leave me with that lifelong fascination for the ocean. So Amazing. It's no surprise, really, that as a professional photographer, my energies should be directed in that direction.
Incredible, yeah. They have a saying. A famous writer, when he described Portugal, he wrote about Portugal as this tiny little country with something really big and scary on one side, and on the other side, the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So it was only a matter of time that somehow you got connected to Portugal, because there is this deep fascination with the sea here and this deep relationship with the ocean. Have you tapped into any of that and looked into the history there?
Well, when we used to go to the Algarve, I've talked about my daughter, but I should also mention my son, who is my older child. My son was very interested in the sort of history of it and would always beg us to go to Henry the Navigator's fort, right at the end there. And so every single year we had to go to that fort and explore it. And you know, the Portuguese maritime history is utterly fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we think of ourselves over here as a maritime country, but I mean, Portugal is as much, if not more so. Not surprising, really, when you think about the shape of it. I mean, you know, it's a narrow country that's all, you know, so much coast. It's astonishing, really, isn't it? Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think actually one of the things I've recently observed and just reminded me of is along the cliffs in Peniche, all those little fishermen's nooks. You know, there's a little yellow fish on a white pole at various points along the shoreline there. And if you go to those, you can usually find a little flight, almost hidden, of hewn stone steps that take you down. You know, you don't want to be scared of heights, that's for sure. They take you down, clinging to the cliffs, to these impossible little nooks on which the fishermen stand. And that whole, I mean, I don't eat fish, which is really a challenge in Portugal. I'm vegetarian, so it's a real challenge in Portugal. But, you know, I managed it. But that aside, these fishermen, this is it's just another example of how the ocean and living with the sea is so embedded in the psyche of the people, that you have all these little special places for the fishermen to go and catch their daily food. I just love it. Incredible.
You must really love Portugal if you're not here because of the food. You know, it's that's real love, Rachel.
Well, I wasn't always vegetarian. I used to love, you know, all of the, you know, cataplana and all of that. And I loved sardines as well. I know not a lot of British people don't go for it, but that would be first meal on arrival in Portugal would be a plate of sardines. Yes, I have in my time enjoyed all the fish that Portugal has to offer.
Brilliant. I saw that when you were here now recently, you did some, you mentioned Praia de Gralha, which will remain a secret. We're not going to tell anybody where it is. So for those of you listening, we're not telling you. We're not telling you where it is. It's not near Rachel's new house. It's nowhere near there. And we're not telling you how to get there either. Okay. So, but I saw that you also went a little bit further north of Nazareth. There are some fantastic beaches up that way where, like you mentioned, you can be the only person on the sand, which is amazing that this still exists in today's day and age, or with the way that we move around the world. That you can still go to a beach and be the only person walking there, or through a forest and be the only person walking there. I think that's something that's quite special about Portugal. And then you went to Abydos. I mean, from a photographer's point of view, behind the lens, why is this such a special place for photography, and what is unique about it in terms of taking photos and seeing it from that perspective?
Well, I think overall, this is going to sound a little bit arty-farty, so I apologize. But, you know,
I'm hoping for arty-farty, so okay, it's okay.
You're in luck. I think you make better photographs, or if you were a painter, better paintings or whatever, if you're inspired. And I think I've probably demonstrated already how much I love Portugal. Now, that's going to make me feel creative, isn't it? If I'm in a place, if I'm in somewhere that makes me feel that happy and contented, then it's going to make me more creative. So it's actually as much about that, if not more about that, than it is about the things I'm photographing. Because there are big waves in other places. And in Óbidos, one of the things I love to photograph is just the wonderful crumbly textures on the walls. But, you know, there are crumbly textures in other places. But because I'm so happy to be there and I'm feeling very relaxed and contented, I can settle into the work much better. So I think also Portugal is under-photographed at the moment for people in the landscape photography genre anyway. There are some brilliant Portuguese photographers, some of whom I connect with online. But in the UK, landscape photography is a very crowded métier. There are so many professional, semi-professional and aspirational, very talented aspirational landscape photographers. Portugal, it feels like it's less the path well travelled. It just feels a little bit like you're forging new territory, which is very satisfying.
Yeah, amazing. I'm surprised. I've never heard anybody say it's under photographed, so that's new. But that's good to know and interesting to know. Rachel, one of the things that we had a conversation on the podcast near the beginning where I spoke to one of the. I mean, you'd hate to do what this guy does. He goes on the jet skis and goes and rescues the surfers. And he spoke about one of the things that makes a place like Nazareth so unique is that to get to waves of that size and magnitude in a lot of other places in the world, you have to go really far away. You have to go into the ocean. You've got to take a boat, or you've got to go on a jet ski. Whereas what makes Nazareth unique is that there's this cauldron, and you can sit there on the rocks, and you can watch the waves happening right in front of you. I mean, I'm imagining for a photographer that's also, and a photographer who doesn't like going on the water, that is a nice thing and quite a unique thing, that you can catch that kind of brute force of nature while still being on a beach or on a cliff face and not crowded up by hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes, Nazareth is quite remarkable because you can also get a side-on perspective as to the wave, so you can actually capture the barrel of a wave with your camera. That's quite hard on most beaches because you're usually facing out to sea. You need a promontory that sticks out into the ocean in order for you to be able to photograph across the waves and capture the barrel. And that, as I say, it is quite unusual. So that's really exciting at Nazareth. In order to do that, you do have to be quite high up. A lot of photographers that I connect with in Australia who are wave photographers, they photograph the barrel, but they get in the water. Now, at Nazareth, you wouldn't do that, not when the surf's up. It's not even safe for the surfers after they finish their ride. So they've got to be rescued pretty fast because they can be really mangled. I've seen a 100-foot wave, the Sky documentary, that I saw the injuries these guys are getting, and they're all padded out with armor on and everything under their wetsuits. So you can't really do that. You have to have an elevated viewpoint and shoot from the land. But actually, I really like that. I mean, when I'm not doing stuff like that, one of the things I love to do is to photograph from a helicopter. You take the doors off the helicopter, and then you can get really great photos. And helicopters can do this thing where they tip like that, so you're pointing straight down, which is really exciting. It's a great
Rachel, come on! You're scared to go in the ocean, but you'll hang out of a helicopter. Something doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
I know. Well, I don't have a problem with heights, luckily, and for some reason, helicopters don't make me feel motion sick. But top of the cliffs at Nazareth is a little bit like that. You can almost get that perpendicular viewpoint, which is really interesting. It's a different way to show the waves.
Do you mind if I just share some photos that you've taken at Nazareth? And one of them actually shows that barrel that you were referring to. So this one's called Lemon and Lime.
Yeah. This one is one of the things I love to do there is everybody does the wider shot and gets the surfers. And those shots are really cool because they show the sheer size of the waves, because the surfer's tiny, so you've got scale. But that's what everybody else does. And I'm not a big fan of doing what everybody else does. The story of Nazareth isn't just that the waves are big. The waves are also beautiful. And I like to use a long lens and get in tight and just pick out a moment where the light and the wave are working in harmony. So this photograph here, I think, is an example of me trying to do that. I just thought the light was beautiful. There was the sun was about to set. So we've got this lovely warm light coming across the back of the wave, but you've got the front of the wave still in shadow and is bluer. And I just love that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you sent this to me, I knew that it was in Portugal, but you didn't tell me where it was. I assumed it was. I thought straight away Nazareth because of the size and that dip in the break, because that's quite synonymous to the waves here. And then the sunlight coming from behind, from that west side. I thought, okay, it's got to be nearby. Was this one? Where was this one taken?
Nazareth as well.
As well, the barrel.
And this is showing the barrel. It's that side-on viewpoint that is so hard to get on most beaches. And again,
so where were you sitting when you took this photo?
I think I'm on the roof of the fort.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really nice up there.
Yeah, it is.
And I deliberately chose a wave where there wasn't a surfer in the frame. I have got photos of the surfers. I've got some really cool photos of the surfers, but as I say, everyone else is doing that. So the ones I publish tend to not have people in them.
Well, you mentioned that Portugal's not very photographed. The surfers at Nazareth are very photographed, so I think you did well. And then this looks like Nazareth as well.
It is.
Incredible. That's huge.
I went to Nazareth in March last year, just before everything went a bit scary worldwide with COVID. It was my last trip before COVID. And the surf was cool. And I just was at the top, probably again on the roof. And the one nice thing about that, really, the roof is as high, the fort is as high as you can get, is that you do get this aerial perspective that I mentioned. So behind the wave, that's the surface of the sea. And I quite like that. It plays with our idea of perspective, and I enjoy doing that.
I love the spray and how the light has caught that spray as well. And that's something that you've caught beautifully there. These are stunning.
Thank you.
I mean, you mentioned a couple of things here, Rachel, which I think kind of summarize Portugal quite nicely. You spoke about those little poles in Peniche where you can go and find little hidden spots for the surfers. You spoke about the beach that shall remain unnamed, where you were the only person on the beach in the mist. And we're talking about some of those other beaches further north of Nazareth. This is still a place where there's a lot to discover and a lot to find. And I've mentioned it so many times on the podcast, but behind every corner, there's a new surprise. And I think that's something quite special about this country.
I absolutely agree. And when we've got our house, Peter and I are planning we want to just every day find a new road and a new path and a new adventure. I just think it's going to be so much fun.
Well, I don't want to talk about too much about the house, but one of the things I remember with speaking with Peter at the beginning was you guys wanted something near the ocean. That was number one, and you wanted something near a beach, which there's a beach. We're not saying which beach it is, and then also, but you wanted something that was kind of in the middle of the country so that you could explore and go around. So, I mean, what's on your list? Where else do you want to go and visit in the country?
Well, I want to, I quite like that sort of, where shall we go today? Let's see what that random road does. I quite like doing that. In fact, I had some people with me in my last visit, and they kept saying, how did you find this out of the way little cafe, Rachel? And it's just literally me going, I wonder where that road goes. So we definitely want to do a lot of that. But I want to explore so much of the country. I'd like to explore every nook and cranny. We've been up to Porto. We love Porto. We've obviously been to Lisbon. We love Lisbon. I've yet to go to some of we've been to Sintra. Sintra's amazing. All the obvious places, but I've yet to visit a lot of the other ones. I mean, I've never been to Fatima or Fatima. How do you pronounce that?
Fatima.
Never been there. Love to go there.
Incredible.
And there are just tons more places that we want to visit. And I'd love to literally go down every single access to the shore on that whole coast, all the way from Sagres right to the top. I'd like to eventually have been to every one of them.
I'm sure you will. That's amazing. It's amazing. Beyond the lens or behind the lens, beyond the lens, let's go beyond the lens. What would you, I mean, we know I think we can tell people your house is going to be in São Martinho de Porto. So that's your hometown for now. What do you want people to know about it, and what makes this such a special place?
It's got a lovely combination of amazing geography. It's this incredible, almost like shell-shaped bay with a narrow entrance to it. I find that quite fascinating, and that you can just walk. There's boardwalks and promenades, and you can just walk round the whole bay, which is really nice. It's got an interesting old town with some great restaurants and little streets that you can wander around. It's also got, let's be realistic, we also need to live, so it's got some facilities, it's got shops and things, which makes day-to-day living easy. And then it's got, apart from the town beach, it has another beach that we're not mentioning, that's very quiet and undiscovered. And it's also close to lots of other things. It's close to the Óbidos Lagoon. It's not too far to get from São Martinho down to the wonderful beaches south of the Óbidos Lagoon. And it's 17 minutes drive to Nazareth, which might be relevant. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing coastline. That whole coastline you've got. I mean, you've got Foz do Aurélio is something stunning with that big cliff. A little bit further down around the other side of the cliff. I don't know if you've been there. There's a beach called Corticeiro. Praia Cortiço. It's literally got one. Have you been there? Okay, so I mean, if you see, you've probably been to more beaches than what I have. So I might have to stop asking you if you've been to the beaches. Besides the photos, I mean, you mentioned some cafes. What are some of the other things that you enjoy doing when you're in Portugal?
I actually just like walking around. So this is going to sound absolutely pathetic, but Peter and I are trying to learn Portuguese. We're not finding it easy. I think learning a language at our stage of life is a challenge, but we are trying our absolute best. And there was one morning during my last visit to Nazareth where I was up quite early and I walked along the seafront and then into the town. And I thought, right, you're going to say good morning to everybody that you see. There weren't many people about, so every isolated person you see. So I said good morning to a few, and they said bom dia back. And then there was this one chap, and I said good morning to him, and he said in Portuguese, good morning, it's cold out. And I understood him, which was so exciting. So then I said, yes, it is. And he understood me. So that was so thrilling. And I'm really looking forward to doing more of that. I want to learn more of the language. I want to be able to talk to the people who live there. I don't want to live in an expat bubble. that doesn't interest me. I want to really connect with the people because I love the Portuguese people. And, you know, hopefully they'll put up with my dreadful accent in the knowledge that I'm trying to get better.
Yeah, you don't have a bad accent, so don't worry. You know, as long as you don't get the word wrong and say some insulting word, the rest they'll put up with. So that's all good. Rachel, what is one thing that you want our listeners and people watching to take away from this conversation?
Don't go to Praia de Graça. No, sorry, I'm being very silly. I think maybe just, I don't know, maybe just realise just how beautiful, how wonderful the country is. I'm sure all your listeners already know that. That's why they're listening. But just sharing with me in my love of the place, I guess. Brilliant.
Speaking of sharing, how can people follow you online and see your beautiful photography? And maybe even, I know you, before I forget, actually, you've got, you do some workshops as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us about those? Maybe there'd be people listening who'd be interested to take part.
Yes, so the next one is in November 2023, which may seem a long way off, but there are only 2 places left on it already.
Wow.
And it's a whole week based in Nazareth, doing waves, but also exploring all those other wonderful spots on the coast. And we also visit Óbidos. And it's just an opportunity, a small group, no more than 7 clients and me, just really relishing in photography and all the beauty that the Silver Coast has to offer.
Beautiful. Sounds amazing. How can listeners follow you and find you online?
Well, if they spell my name properly, it's easy to find me because apparently there's no one else with my exact name in the world. So Rachel Talibart, my website's my name, my Instagram is my name. I do a little bit of Twitter, which is @rtalibart. And you can find links to my workshops websites from all of those. So I'm quite easy to find.
Yeah, we're in the middle of negotiations to change that to Raquel Talibart from when you move here, but we know that's still up in the air. And it's Rachel with a Rachel for our people listening and not watching. So yeah, definitely we'll put some links in the show notes and people can follow and be kept up to date with your work. Rachel, a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life, why?
I struggled with this one. Portugal, the simple life. Because it's easy to be you. I know that sounds really weird, but I think you get it. No one really minds. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. You can just be the true you, and everyone's cool with it.
I love that. I like that a lot. Thank you. Yeah, I've never heard anybody put it that way, but makes perfect sense.
Good.
Rachel, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much. And I was supposed to say, and that's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Rachel, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, um abraço. Welcome to the simple life.